Let me tell you something I've never told a living soul the whole way through. I was there. I was the one holding the lantern when we found it, and for years I kept my mouth shut because some truths don't belong to the man who finds them. But I'm old now. My hands shake when I pour tea, and a story like this, it deserves to outlive me. So listen. It starts with a death. The Dowager Queen Isolde of Moravia died on the third night of the frost. She was 91 years old, and she went quietly, in her own bed, in the house she'd loved more than any palace they ever tried to keep her in. Greyholt Manor, it was called. Out past the river, at the edge of the pine country, where the road turns to gravel and the world goes silent except for wind. I didn't know her. Understand that. I was 22, a nobody, third year in the Queen's Guard, the kind of soldier they post at doors nobody important ever walks through. I'd seen her twice in my life, both times from far off, a small figure wrapped in gray, walking her gardens with a cane she clearly hated using. But when she died, everything changed for a lot of people, including me. Because within a week of her burial, the whispers started, and the whispers were about the jewels. You have to know what the jewels meant. In Moravia, we didn't have much. We were a cold country, a poor country, more stone than gold, but we had the winter set, the moonstone regalia, a crown, a collar, and two long earrings, all set with pale blue stones that seemed to hold light inside them even in the dark. They'd belonged to queens going back 300 years. When a new monarch was crowned, the winter set came out, and for one day the whole poor kingdom felt rich. That was what it was for. Not for wearing, for believing. And the Dowager Queen Isolde had kept them. That was the arrangement, old and half forgotten. The crown jewels stayed with the eldest living queen until the next coronation. So for 30 years the winter set had been at Greyholt, in Isolde's care, and nobody thought a thing about it. Until she died, and they went to fetch it. And it wasn't there. I remember the morning we got the order. Cold, the kind of cold that gets into your teeth. Captain Aldrich came into the guardroom with his jaw set like a man who'd been arguing all night and lost. He was a big man, Aldrich, gray at the temples, quiet in a way that made loud men nervous. He'd served the crown 40 years. I'd never once seen him rattled. He looked rattled. "6 of you," he said, "kit and horses. We ride to Greyholt at first light." Somebody asked why. Aldrich didn't answer straight. He just said, "We're to search the house." The room went still. You didn't search a queen's house, not the Dowager Queen's. You didn't paw through the belongings of a woman 3 days in the ground. It felt wrong just hearing it out loud. But the order hadn't come from Aldrich. It had come from the Chancellor. Now here's where I have to tell you about Chancellor Varn, and I'll try to be fair, though God knows he never earned it. Varn ran the treasury and half the court besides. He had a smile like a locked drawer. Young King Rennick was only 19 then. His coronation was set for spring, and Varn had made himself the boy's shadow, the voice in his ear on every matter of coin and law. And it was Varn who'd stood up in council and said the words that put us on the road. The winter set is gone. The Dowager Queen's household has robbed the crown, and someone in that house knows where the jewels are. Robbed the crown. About a woman who'd worn that crown before most of them were born. We rode out in the gray dawn, 6 guardsmen and Aldrich, and I remember nobody spoke the whole way. The pines went by, black and dripping. The river ran high and brown. And the further we got from the city, the heavier the whole thing sat on me, though I couldn't have said why. Greyholt came up out of the mist near noon. It wasn't grand. That surprised me. I'd expected some cold palace, but it was just a big old stone manor gone soft at the edges, ivy up the walls, a crooked chimney, smoke still curling from it because the servants hadn't stopped keeping the fires. Somebody was still living like she might come home. That got me right in the chest, and I didn't even know her. An old woman met us at the door. Gray braid, apron, hands like tree roots. Her name was Myra, and she'd been Isolde's housekeeper for 51 years. She looked at Aldrich, and she looked at the six of us behind him with our swords and our official faces, and I watched her understand exactly what we'd come to do. She didn't shout, she didn't beg. She just went white and gripped the doorframe. "You'll not find thieves here," she said, quiet, steady. "There are no thieves in this house." Aldrich took off his helm. "That's a small thing, but I remember it because he didn't have to. Mistress Myra," he said, "I take no joy in this, but I have my orders and they come from the king's own council. We must search the house for the winter set." "It's not here," she said. "Then the search will be quick, and will trouble you no more. You don't understand," and her voice cracked just a little. "It's not here because she doesn't have it." Nobody knew what to make of that. I'll be honest, at the time I thought she was lying to protect the old woman's name. That's what I thought all afternoon while we did the ugly work. And it was ugly. There's no soft way to search a dead woman's home. We opened her wardrobes and touched her dresses, still smelling of the lavender she must have kept in them. We lifted the mattress off her bed. We took the paintings off the walls and felt behind them for hidden safes. We went through the library and the cellar and the cold pantry and the stables. We were careful. Aldrich made us careful, everything back where it was, he kept saying. She was a queen, treat this house like she's watching. But careful or not, it was a violation and every one of us felt it. We found nothing, no jewels, no crown, no pale blue stones. By dusk we'd searched every room in the house twice, and I could see the thing settling on Aldrich that I dreaded, because it meant we'd have to go back and tell the Chancellor the jewels were truly gone. And you didn't have to be clever to see where that road led. If the jewels were gone and not in the house, then the household had sold them. And if the household had sold the crown's treasure, then people were going to hang. Myra, the cook, the two stable boys, old servants who'd given their whole lives to that woman. I was standing in the front hall when I understood that, and I felt sick. That's when the boy spoke up. One of the stable lads, Ted, maybe 14, all elbows. He'd been watching us all day with big scared eyes, and now he tugged Aldrich's sleeve, which took more nerve than most grown men had. "You didn't do the ice house, sir," he said. Aldrich looked at him. "What ice house?" "Down the garden, past the wall, by the old orchard." The boy swallowed. "Nobody goes down there, but her ladyship went. Winters mostly. She'd take a lantern and go down alone and tell us all to stay up at the house." I watched something change in Aldrich's face. "Alone," he said. "Always alone, sir. Now you keep an old queen's ice house, you don't go down there in winter. Winter's when the ice house does its own work. There's no reason to visit an ice house in the frost. In summer, yes, to fetch cold for the kitchen. But winter, none." Aldrich turned to me. Of all six of us, he turned to me, and I've wondered since if he did it because I was the youngest and least likely to run my mouth back at court. "Vel," he said, "get a lantern, you and me." Myra had come into the hall. She'd heard the boy, and I watched the color go out of her all over again, but it was a different fear this time, not the fear of being wrongly accused. It was the fear of a secret about to be pulled up into the light. "Captain," she said, "please, some things aren't ours to open." Aldrich stopped at the door. He looked at her a long moment, and he said something I've never forgotten. "Mistress Myra, I've served the crown 40 years, and in 40 years I've learned that the secrets people die to keep are almost never the shameful ones. Usually they're the good ones, the ones too heavy to say out loud." He put his helm back on. "If there's shame down there, I'll bury it with her. You have my word as a guardsman, but I have to know." She didn't move to stop us. She just stood there with her old hands pressed to her mouth and let us go. The garden was black by then. The lantern threw a little gold circle around our boots, and the rest was pine dark and cold enough to hurt. We went down past the wall, past the dead orchard where the apple trees stood like gray skeletons, and there it was, a low stone hump built into the hillside, half buried, a wooden door bound in iron with a heavy old lock. An expensive lock. That's the first thing I noticed. A good, new, expensive lock on an old, forgotten ice house at the far end of a dead queen's garden. Aldrich noticed it too. "Now why," he said quietly, "would you lock ice?" The stable boy had given us the key without being asked, which told me the servants knew there was something down here even if they didn't know what. Aldrich worked the lock. It was stiff with cold. It took both his hands and a lot of patience, and the whole time my heart was going like a drum, and the wind was moving in the dead trees above us, and I swear the whole garden felt like it was holding its breath. The lock gave. The door swung in on a black mouth of cold. Aldrich took the lantern from me and stepped inside, and I followed, and the light climbed up the stone walls and, well, that's where I have to stop for a moment, because to this day, 40 years on, I still don't have the words for what we found down there. It wasn't ice. I'll tell you the rest. But first you have to understand something about that room, and about the woman who built it, and about what a crown really is when you strip the gold away. Because what we found in that ice house wasn't a queen's treasure. It was a queen's confession. And it changed the way I understood everything: duty, honor, the crown itself, and what it means to keep faith with the dead. Stay with me. It gets darker before it gets right, but it does get right. In the end, it gets right. I'll take you back down into the cold now, back to that black doorway and the lantern light climbing the walls. Inside, the ice house wasn't full of ice. It hadn't been full of ice in years, you could tell by the dust, by the dry cold instead of the wet cold, by the smell of old paper instead of old water. Somebody had emptied it and dried it out and made it into something else. A room, a hidden room. There was a table, a chair, a single tall cabinet against the far wall, and there were shelves, long stone shelves along both sides, and every one of them was stacked with books. Not story books, ledgers, great heavy account books, dozens of them, the kind the treasury keeps, all bound in dark leather and lined up like soldiers. Aldrich stood very still in the middle of it all. I watched him turn slowly, taking it in, and I saw him do the same math I was doing. This wasn't a thief's den. Thieves don't keep records. Thieves burn records. Whatever this was, it was the opposite of hiding a crime. It was somebody keeping proof. "Well," he said softly, "bring the light close." We went to the table first. There was a book lying open on it, and a candle stub, and an ink pot gone dry, and a pair of small reading glasses folded neatly beside them, like she'd only just stepped away. I don't mind telling you the glasses got me. This tiny human thing. An old woman's spectacles waiting for her to come back and read. The open book was full of her handwriting. Neat, slanting, the letters getting shakier toward the last pages, the way an old person's hand does. And Aldrich bent over it and read, and I held the lantern, and I watched his face while he read, and I saw a hard old soldier go from confusion to disbelief, to something I can only call grief. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he straightened up and he said, "Well, I'm going to tell you what this is, and then you're going to swear to me you'll carry it right. Can you do that?" "Yes, Captain," I said, though I didn't understand. "The jewels aren't stolen," he said. "The jewels were spent." Now let me explain what he meant, because it took me a while too. 30 years back, long before I was born into any of this, Moravia had a terrible year. 2 bad harvests in a row, then a fever that swept the river towns. People were starving. Whole villages emptied. This is history. You can find it in the old books. It was called the Gray Winter, and they still sang sad songs about it when I was a boy. What the songs didn't say, what nobody knew, was how the kingdom got through it. The treasury was empty. The young king of that day, Isolde's own son, was proud and frightened and out of his depth, and the council was paralyzed, and people were dying in the snow while lords argued about loans. And Isolde, she was the widowed queen mother by then, no crown of her own anymore, just an old title and a house in the pines. Isolde did a thing that was quiet and enormous and, strictly speaking, forbidden. She took the winter set, the crown jewels in her keeping, and she took them across the border in secret herself, an old woman in a plain cart, and she sold them. Sold the crown of Moravia, the moonstone regalia, 300 years of queens, she sold every stone. And she brought back grain, cartloads of it, and medicine and salt and coin to pay for more. And she moved it into the starving towns through the church and the guilds and 100 quiet hands. And she made every single person swear it came from an anonymous friend of the poor. And she told no one, not the king, not the council, not history, that the friend of the poor was the crown jewels melted down to bread. That's what the ledgers were, 30 years of them. Every coin she got for the jewels, every sack of grain, every barrel, every name of every town it went to. She kept the accounts of her own secret because, and this was in the open book in her own shaky hand, Aldrich read it to me right there because if I am ever called a thief, let the truth be found and not my word taken. The dead cannot defend themselves, so I leave the defense here in ink for whoever comes searching. She knew, you understand. She knew that one day, after she was gone, someone would come searching for the jewels. She knew she'd be called a thief, and instead of destroying the evidence, she'd spent 30 years building it. Not to clear her name while she lived, she never told a soul while she lived, but to protect the servants she knew would be blamed after she died. She built a room to take the blame off other people's shoulders and put it back on her own, from the grave. I was 22. I thought I understood what honor was. Standing in that cold room, I understood I hadn't known the first thing about it. But the coronation, I said, my voice came out strange. The king's crowning is in the spring, they need the winter set. What did she? Aldrich was already moving, to the tall cabinet against the far wall. It had a lock too, smaller, and the key for it was tied to the open ledger with a ribbon, like she'd wanted it found together with the truth. He opened it, and the pale blue light spilled out into the lantern glow, and I forgot how to breathe. The winter set was in there. The crown, the collar, the 2 long earrings. Sitting on dark velvet, the moonstones catching the light and holding it the way they were famous for, glowing soft and blue in that black cold room. For one wild second I thought she lied. She kept them there right here. Then Aldrich picked up the crown, and he turned it over in his big hands. And he laughed once very quietly, a broken sort of laugh, and he said, "Glass. Glass." She'd had copies made. Master's work, the finest her secret coin could buy, glass and paint so good it had fooled the whole court for 30 years. Because the whole court had only ever seen the winter set from a distance, one day every coronation on a cushion, behind guards. Nobody had ever held it. Nobody had ever looked close. So Isolde had quietly swapped the real jewels she'd sold for perfect fakes, and for 30 years the kingdom had crowned itself with glass and never known, and never needed to know, because the crown was never really about the stones. She'd written that too. Aldrich found it later, near the end of the last ledger, and I've kept the words in my head all my life. A crown is not the jewels. A crown is the promise the people make to believe in one another for one day. Glass will keep that promise as well as any stone, and the stones are keeping a better promise now. They are keeping children alive. Let the glass be crowned. Let the truth sleep here, and forgive an old woman who loved her country more than she feared its judgment. We stood in that ice house, the 2 of us, a grizzled captain and a green boy, and neither of us said anything for a long, long time. The lantern hissed. The wind moved above us in the dead orchard, and on the velvet the glass crown glowed its gentle false blue, keeping its promise still. And then the trouble started, because now we knew, and knowing was dangerous. Aldrich sat down heavily in her chair, rubbed his face with both hands, and I understood he wasn't tired, he was cornered. He was doing the thing I'd only just begun to do, which was to see all the roads leading out of that room, and to see that most of them were bad. "Think well," he said. "Think what happens if I carry these ledgers back to court." I tried. The chancellor learns the truth. The servants are cleared, her names. Her name's ruined, Aldrich said flatly. That's what happens, think again. Chancellor Varn stood up in council and called her a thief. He staked his standing on it. If I bring proof she wasn't a thief but a savior, do you imagine he stands up and says, "How wonderful, I was wrong, let us honor her"? No, he buries it, or worse, he uses it. Aldrich looked at me hard. A boy king, 19 weeks from his crowning. And Varn walks in with proof that the winter set on the coronation cushion is glass. Proof the crown jewels were smuggled abroad and sold. In the wrong mouth, that's not a story of a queen's sacrifice, Vel. That's a scandal that says the crown of Marovia is a fraud. Weeks before the boy's crowned. It could break him. It could break the crown itself. I hadn't seen that. I saw it now and it was cold. So we say nothing, I said slowly. We put it all back. We lock the door. We tell them the jewels are truly gone and let it lie. And the servants hang, Aldrich said. Myra, the boys. Somebody has to answer for missing crown jewels. If the truth stays buried, innocent people pay for it. That's the whole thing she was trying to prevent. He shook his head. Do you see? She built this room to save them. If we hide it, we undo the one thing she died to do. Both roads bad. Tell the truth, and you might break a young king and shame the woman who saved the kingdom. Hide the truth, and innocent people die for a crime that was really an act of mercy. That's where part 2 has to leave us. In the cold, with the glass crown glowing, with a captain and a boy holding a secret heavy enough to sink a kingdom and no safe way to set it down. I told you it gets darker before it gets right. Here's where it gets right. Aldrich sat in that chair a long time. I've thought since that I watched a man age a year in 10 minutes. And then he stood up, and there was something settled in him, and I knew he'd found the road. There's a third way, he said. It's harder than both, but it's the only one with honor in it. What is it? We don't take this to Varn, he said. We take it to the king. I must have looked frightened, because he gripped my shoulder. Not the court, not the council, the boy himself, alone. We put the truth in his hands and no one else's, and we let the king of Marovia decide what the crown does with the crown's own secret. That's not our choice to make, Vel. We're guardsmen, we guard. But he's the one who has to wear the thing. Let him choose with his eyes open. And if he chooses wrong, if he panics, he's 19. Aldrich looked at the glass crown a long moment. Then he's 19 and the crown was already a mistake, he said quietly. But I don't think he will. I've watched that boy. There's more in him than Varn thinks. Varn's kept him small on purpose. Maybe it's time somebody trusted him with something large. So that's what we did. And I'll tell you how it went, because it's the part I'm proudest of in a life that didn't have much else in it to be proud of. We took nothing from the room but 3 things. The open ledger with her confession, the last ledger with the words about the crown and the promise, and the glass crown itself. Everything else we left, and we locked the ice house, and Aldrich gave the key to Myra with his own hands. I'll never forget her face when he did it, because she'd spent that whole day braced to be arrested, and instead a captain of the Queen's Guard put the key back in her palm and folded her old fingers over it and said, "She was the finest woman this kingdom ever bred, and no one will ever hear otherwise from me. You kept her faith, mistress. Keep it a while longer." Myra wept then. She hadn't wept all day, through all of it, but she wept then, and I had to look away. We rode back through the night, which we were never supposed to do, and we did a thing that could have hanged us both. We went around the chancellor entirely. Aldrich knew a servant's stare. He knew the king's man. And in the gray hour before dawn, Captain Aldrich and one nobody guardsman named Thomas Vel were let quietly into a small study where a thin, tired, nervous 19-year-old boy sat waiting, not yet crowned, king in name and frightened in fact. Aldrich knelt. I knelt behind him, and Aldrich told him everything, plain and whole, holding nothing back, sparing neither the queen's sacrifice nor the danger it carried. He put the ledgers on the table. He put the glass crown beside them. And then he did the bravest thing of all. He stopped talking and he waited, and he let a boy decide. King Rennick picked up the glass crown. He turned it over in his hands the way Aldrich had. This boy who was to be crowned in the spring, holding the glass he'd wear, learning in that moment that it was glass. I watched his face. I was ready for anger, for fear, for him to call for Varn and wash his hands of us. Instead, and I've told this to no one until now, instead the boy read his grandmother's confession, the part about the friend of the poor and the children kept alive, and he read the part about the promise being worth more than the stones. And this king of Moravia, 19 years old, put the glass crown down very gently, and covered his face with his hands, and cried like the grandson he was. When he could speak, he said, "She never told anyone, she let them think what they'd think, for 30 years. Yes, Majesty," Aldrich said. "To protect me, and people like Myra, and a country that would have burned her for it." Yes. The boy was quiet a while, and then he did the thing that made me believe in him for the rest of my life. He didn't hide the truth, but he didn't destroy his grandmother either. He found the third road inside the third road, and it was wiser than anything Aldrich or I would have managed. He kept the secret of the glass for the crown's sake, for the coronation, for the kingdom's faith. To this day, as far as any book records, the winter set is the winter set, and Moravia is crowned in moonstone, and nobody knows it's glass. That secret we did bury. It's buried still. I'm the last one who knows it, and I'll be gone soon, and then it'll be as if it were never true. Let the glass be crowned, she'd written. So it was, and so it is. But he cleared the servants, quietly, cleverly, without ever revealing why. He issued a private order under his own hand. The winter set had been examined and found whole and accounted for in the Dowager Queen's keeping, and the matter was closed by royal decree, and any further word of theft against her household was an offense against the crown itself. Just like that. No trial. No hangings. Myra lived out her years at Greyholt in peace. The stable boys grew up free men. Chancellor Varn, who'd staked so much on calling a dead queen a thief, was made to eat a royal decree that said the opposite in public, and never knew why the boy he thought he owned had suddenly grown a spine. And the real jewels, the moonstones sold 30 years gone, scattered across the world into the hands of foreign lords who'd never know what they'd bought, the king let them go. "They're doing better work than sitting on a cushion," he said. "Let them stay bred." That was the resolution. No grand reveal. No statue, no song, no page in the history books. The greatest thing a queen of Moravia ever did stayed a secret, on purpose, kept by the very people it might have destroyed. Because that's what she'd wanted. And because sometimes the highest honor you can pay the dead is to protect the choice they made, even when it costs you the glory of telling the world how good they were. We never spoke of it again, Aldrich and I, not once in all the years after. He'd nod to me across the guardroom sometimes, an old man nod, and I'd nod back, and that was the whole conversation, and it was enough. He died 11 years later at his post, on his feet, the way he'd have wanted. I stood his death watch, and when they lowered him down I thought about the ice house, and the key he'd put back in Myra's hand, and I thought, there lies a man who found the truth and carried it right. I've carried it right too, I hope, all this time. And now I've set it down here with you because I'm the last one, and a story like this shouldn't die in a shaking old man's chest. So remember her. Not by name, she wouldn't want that. Just remember that once there was a queen who sold the crown to buy bread, and let the world call her a thief rather than let the world call her a saint, and kept the accounts of her own sacrifice locked in a cold, dark room, not to save herself, but to save the small people who'd take the blame when she was gone. That's what a crown is, if you strip the gold away. Not the jewels. The promise. And the ones brave enough to keep it in the dark, where no one's watching, where there's nothing to be won but the quiet knowing that you did right by the dead. Rest easy, old woman, your glass is still crowned, your secret's still kept. And your bread's still keeping children alive, somewhere, 300 miles and 30 years from the cold room where you laid the truth down to sleep.